everyone. Welcome. If you're joining here on Zoom or you're joining on Facebook, it's so wonderful to be able to just mark the end of Shabbat with all of you and to hear some stories from the 1980s at Temple Bethel. I know I'm really excited to hear all of those. But before we dive into that, we are going to go into our Havdalah blessings. So I invite you, if you happen to have a Havdalah candle, to light it so that we can end Shabbat the same way with which we began it, which is with light.
I need that back.
As we do the Havdalah service, I'm going to ask everyone if you can please just mute yourself for this part so that we can all hear as well as possible. And then when it comes to our conversation about TBE in the 1980s, we'll be able to jump in a little bit more.
Didn't you have fun with me?
Well done.
It was with Sarah, not with me. I didn't do have fun.
Okay.
Alana wasn't there.
Well, then it's just going to go out anyhow like that.
You have a
There we go. Okay. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen Yai lai la 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 lai 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 la 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 lai lai ya la la ya la lai lai ya la lai lai ya la lai. And we put aside our grape juice or wine, hoping that the sweetness of Shabbat is something that we can take with us into the week ahead. And I invite you to take out any spices you might have, anything with a beautiful aroma that just can remind you of the beauty of the Sabbath day. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim Yai lai la 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 lai 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 la 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 lai lai ya la lai ya la lai lai ya la lai lai ya la lai. We come back to our twisted candle of its many wicks. Tonight we have a few people who are with us who were a big part of TBE in the 1980s. And every one of the people who will be sharing stories tonight has their own unique experience that we can share. Just like the many different candles that come together to make our Havdalah candle, each one makes the light just a little bit brighter. Ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei ha'esh borei day of Shabbat has been a much needed respite from an ailing and challenging world. And the hope is that as we go back into this next week, we can take some of the soul nourishing time that we had on this Sabbath day to help us prepare to enter into the world that is not yet holy, taking an extra bit of Shabbat holiness with us as we do. La 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 la. Ya la la ya la la ya la la ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hamavdil ben chodesh lechol. Hamavdil ben chodesh lechol. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. O good week, O week of peace, may gladness reign and joy increase. O good week, O week of peace, may gladness reign and joy increase. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hakilati. Bimheira v'yameinu, Yavo eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David. Miriam Hanevia, Oz v'zimra b'yadam, Miriam tir koditanu, L'dil zimrat olam. Bimheira v'yameinu, iti v'yeinu, El mei ha-Yeshua, El mei ha-Yeshua. We hope the beauty of our prophets can help us to create an even more beautiful week ahead. And now that we have begun this new week together in sacred community, we have an opportunity to do what we've been doing over the past several months, which is to really celebrate so much of Temple Bethel's rich history over the past 100 years. We've gone through hearing a little bit about Temple Bethel in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. And tonight, we're focusing primarily on the 1980s. And I know that for many of the people who are going to be sharing stories tonight, you were a part of Temple Bethel in the 1980s, but you were a part of Temple Bethel in other decades as well, perhaps many, many other decades as well. And so it can be a little hard to distinguish one from another. That is totally okay. But really, we just want to give this opportunity to share some stories with one another. So Eileen and Victor, I know that you have a few things that you're going to share from the 1980s. Amy Noble, so glad that you are here to be able to share some stories, as well as Jacob. And I know there's other people who are here today who were a part of the temple at that time. And if you want to share some of your stories, please feel free to jump in to do that as well.
I know Amy's fighting to stay awake look.
Yeah, so that's exactly why I want to turn to Amy right now, so that Amy, if you would like to share a little bit about your experiences.
I don't know if I'm fighting to stay awake or if I'm fighting to try to remember some stories from the 80s. because that was a long time ago.
The joke in our family is that I'm the one that shouldn't remember anything, and Amy's the one that actually doesn't remember anything.
Yes. That is the joke in our family.
Well, you can also work together. That sibling bond is helpful,
Yeah.
right?
It sure is. What I remember most about the 80s is just being involved in youth group. I actually left mid 80s to go to college and then moved to Chicago. So I wasn't there all of the 80s either. So,
You're
but
allowed to share some of the 70s
I can
too.
share some of the stuff. But back in the 80s, I was president of the Temple youth group. At that point, it was TASPY. And just as I was leaving, Jacob became a board member of SCIFT, which is the Southern California Youth Group Federation. So we were both really involved in youth group. I also remember working at the preschool during my last few years of high school, of which I had Roz and Dawn's little one, Adam, who was in my preschool class, or who I used to stay late for to make sure that he got picked up. That I remember too. So I was there pretty much after school every day. To work in preschool. I left school early, got my work experience at Bethel doing preschool. And here I am a gazillion years later, still teaching preschool, but in the public schools. So, but yeah, I spent a lot of time running youth group. We did sleepovers at the synagogue and youth group stuff out of the synagogue and all over Southern California and Northern California. And that's pretty much like most of what I remember. I don't know, Jacob, what else do you got? He's got a lot more.
One of the rabbis prompting questions was, what perks did we get as rabbi kids? And so the bar and bat mitzvah celebrations in the 80s were lavish.
Yes, they were.
And some of the time we would get invited and some of the time we wouldn't. But if my dad knew that the party was going to be crazy, he made sure that to get us invited. Every single, well, first of all, like,
Sorry, could you say
when Maxine had her bat mitzvah a few years ago, I had this idea that I wanted to recreate the 80s bat mitzvah party and have a caricature artist and a candy artist and a limbo contest.
And the cake lighting.
The cake cutting and the candle lighting. I suppose the secret can be revealed now. My dad hated the candle lighting ceremonies.
Yes, he did.
He always wanted to leave early. I would win the limbo contest every single bar bat mitzvah because when I was like 11 or 12 years old, I was like 3'6" and I didn't even have to bend over before most of the kids were out of the contest. I have here, this is the stack of 45 records that I won in those contests. This is Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl. I got Duran Duran. I got more Duran Duran. There's probably some Cyndi Lauper in there, some Lionel Richie. I won all of the limbo contests.
Where does he live?
in Los Angeles?
Yeah. Oh my God.
That's great. And I was asking also, sorry, Amy, did you want to say something?
No, I was going to say a part of the perk of being the rabbi's kid was I had keys to the building too. So yeah, especially with, I also closed up the preschool a lot. So I had keys so we could get in and out also.
Oh, but it does the opposite.
All times.
Oh, good, right. Good.
But
The alarm systems weren't what they are now.
no, I don't remember there being an alarm. I didn't have to turn one on or off.
Yeah, there wasn't any.
There were no alarms.
But it sounds like it really was a home away from home.
It was home away from home, without a doubt.
Yeah, my kids thought they lived there.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, so I was temple president in 1980 and 81, and it was a challenging time. The temple was doing very well. The membership was increasing, but almost all of the new members were coming from the west side of the hill or the top of the hill, or from Torrance. And they wanted to move the temple to the top of the hill. And the founders of the temple, of course, were from San Pedro, and they were very much opposed to that, understandably. So it was difficult times. For a while, there was a classroom in a school at the top of the hill, and there was Ridgecrest High School, and there was transportation provided for kids who who didn't want to do that and wanted to be on the San Pedro side, but didn't live there. Anyway, it worked itself out eventually. People realized that the best thing was to refurbish the existing temple, which was done. It was expanded. There were new classrooms. The temple, it was modernized and fixed up. And the disagreement sort of faded away. And I think people are very happy with what the outcome was. But it was a trying time.
Well, I have to say, you brought back the memories, my memories of carpooling to Hebrew school.
My dad drove the carpool.
Your dad drove?
My dad drove the carpool from our side of the hill.
Well, you were lucky because he didn't drive our kids.
I drove our carpool often and got one of my few speeding tickets doing that.
Jason Leach and Maury Gross became best friends because Maury drove our carpool. And Jason got to go with Jason and Adam got to go with he and his kids back and forth.
And I drove carpool from Torrance area. And that's how Lori got to be friends with Donnie and Rachel.
Amazing. This brings back memories for me because when I taught in the 70s, I also had a key to the temple. And one year we had a Saturday school. It was after Saturday school, rather. We had a Hebrew class for the people that were on the other side of the hill that couldn't come. And so it was like a crash course in teaching Hebrew for a year. But we also were in the days of carpools if you didn't live close. Luckily, I lived close enough. And Amy and Jacob, I just want to tell you that I remember when you were really little kids. I'm Barbara Rangel Gerlitsky. And I remember, and the week, I think it was the week that your brother Adam was born was the week that I got married in the sanctuary. And your dad was there and he had to leave early. And now I understand why.
Do any of you guys remember going to Granny's Donuts? I think it was either after Hebrew school or religious or Sunday school.
Yes, but within the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's still there.
Oh yeah, it's still there. Now it may have changed a little bit, but our son, John, and his wife, came down over the 4th of July weekend, decided they wanted to have a staycation at our house, which was really great. And we spent one day on San Pedro memorabilia. And we went past the temple. We tried to get in, but we'll come back with them. And we went to Averill Park, where I think we still do throwing our sins into the river there. Do we do that?
Toshly, yeah.
Lake. So we went walking around the park, and our last stop was Granny's Donuts. And there was John pointing to the sign, Granny's Donuts.
Dad never stopped for donuts.
What?
Dad never stopped for donuts.
I don't know
Is that on Western?
There used to be a gas station there, as I recall, because we used to go there. And we followed them wherever they went when they moved.
Was also active in with them.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
And that was before all the gas shortages. There were gas stations on both corners. Then they all closed and the donut shop opened over there.
Was Granny's Donuts on Western?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I know where that
Still is.
was. We stopped there.
Still is.
North of Wayman? North.
Yeah, it's before the
A
park.
little bit north of Wayman.
Yeah. We stopped there often enough.
Okay, so then I sent the picture of John to Stephanie. Stephanie was in New York on a family vacation. And she looks at the picture and she says, and she writes back to John, "Is it still good?" And he says, "Well, it's pretty good, but not as good as I remember." And she said, "I'm gonna come down and have the taste test next time we're there." So the kids have, I don't think we
Fond memory.
fond memories. I don't think we bribed them with the donuts. It just became a thing we did after religious school or Hebrew school, and was always had very fond
I
memories.
remember doing that, picking them up for after club.
Well, we were in the throes of bringing up our kids during that time, right in the middle of it. And in 1980, Ilana, who same age as Stephanie.
Yeah, we're all about the same age.
Yeah, became bat mitzvah. I was trying to figure out, Ellen was she was the cantor during that time.
Yeah.
What's her last name?
Here
Ellen
in 83, Ellen
Schwab.
Starr.
Ellen Starr Schwab.
Right.
Oh, Ellen Schwab. She was the cantor then.
Cantor in 83.
Who was before that? Not John Kaplan, was it?
No. That actually, yes, John was before.
John came in 80 and Ellen replaced him in 83.
83.
Very good. Very good.
I knew when I signed up for this that we were going to play the "Who was the Cantor When" game.
Well, it's part of the package.
Read the,
We no
read
longer
the
had
book
a
when it comes
Presbyterian
out.
in
The
the
list
80s.
is in the book.
Well,
When was the first renovation done? When they added the second story? Wasn't that during the 80s?
Yes.
Because I remember going there the first time after it was renovated. I was totally, it's like, where is everything? And I went upstairs to the classes like, where is everything?
Well,
But we're so used to it.
The only problem with the renovation, and the temple's always weird because every time it gets rebuilt, things are more or less in the same place, but not in the same place. And they really put the youth lounge in the wrong place the first time they renovated. The youth lounge used to be off of the social hall,
In the kitchen.
and it was
Right.
and we would just sort of barricade ourselves in there during onegs, and then it was too far away when they.
Yeah, it got put all the way upstairs.
Upstairs in the back corner where we could make a lot of noise and nobody would hear us.
Yeah.
I imagine that might have been purposeful.
And it got
Possible.
repainted every other year.
I liked it better off the social hall.
Yeah, that was in the,
So,
obviously in the 70s off the social hall. Right, until the renovation.
I think
And
we
then they
technically.
extended, the kitchen grew into the kitchen
It
became
was-
larger and into that, what was the youth group, the youth lounge.
Amy, I think that we were technically not allowed in the youth lounge until after we became bar bat mitzvah.
Yeah, but we were always part of the youth group.
There was not a younger youth group at that time. It was only Tosby.
It was
So
only,
only the older kids got to go in the youth lounge.
Yeah,
but
and
Roz,
maybe
we were always part of the youth group or the confirmation class because we were the adopted children, and we were like, confirmation was always taught at our house. I don't know how many times during the years. And so we were always a part of everybody's group, no matter
Yeah.
as we were growing up.
One of the pictures we have is of my sister's class who was your dad's first confirmation class.
Right.
That was the 70s. But of them giving him the pair of Levi's that he got, and they always used to talk about getting you ready for bed and getting you guys ready to go to sleep as they were
Yeah.
doing class.
Changing Jacob's diapers.
Yes. Sorry, Jacob.
That sounds like a song, changing Jacob's diaper.
I thought we were talking about the 80s.
But not in the 80s. That was back in the
That
70s.
was the 70s. That's
That was
true.
the 70s, not the 80s. Yeah.
Roz, I remember seeing you because I go once or twice during the year when I go to my folks for the holidays. And I remember at High Holy Days, we were comparing what we did at Pesach, et cetera, and talking about our kids.
Well, yeah, and mine were in the preschool the whole time it was there.
in San Pedro.
So
When she
between
comes
the
to
two of them,
see,
they were both involved. So we were at the temple from the time they were babies.
In 1980 and 81, also the library was modernized and expanded, and the book collection was increased too.
We can't hear you, Jeff.
How do we do this?
Your microphone might be a little bit low, but he was saying that the library was expanded and the book collection was expanded at that time as well.
Oh, yeah.
you're on mute, Jeff. You need to, now you're on mute.
There you go.
Yeah.
What I love right here is we have a lot more people who were here in the 1980s than I even thought we would have. And that is such a wonderful blessing. But also we have multi-generational kind of things going on here, which is really, really cool. So what I'd love to do is go back to you, Amy and Jacob, for just a second, because I hear that there may or may not be some incriminating stories that you wanted to share about things going on in the 1980s. And I think that we need to allow that to come to light right now. The people
Yeah,
want to
ma'am.
know.
Maybe I should take that one.
Yeah, you take that one because it's me and I'm not ready.
So
It's gonna incriminate me.
I keep looking through who's here, because one of the things that I imagine would be the case about this part of the storytelling is some very, very shoddy attempts on my part to protect adolescent behavior from over 30 years ago, and among any of your potential family members. And the answer is yes. Some of you are here.
Yeah.
Ettingers, Leaches, Rikers. It's a good thing the Morrises aren't here. But anyway, we weren't bad kids. We were a little mischievous, and we were a lot curious, maybe a little bored. The big thing was when we got to high school age and started participating in Skifty, there was, the attraction to those other Jewish kids that grew up in the city and weren't all the way down in the South Bay suburbs like we were. And there might have been some sneaking away to parties when we weren't supposed to have the car. I was asking a friend of mine from the temple for stories for tonight, and she said something about there might have been a Tosby sleepover when there were 2 boys and 2 girls that shared a bed together. I don't know if that happened or not. I have no independent recollection of that. Amy's shaking her head.
There were definitely sleepovers in the building.
Oh, and there might have been sleepovers.
Sleeping bags that were shared.
And there might have been beer.
And there might have been some beer or other alcohol that shouldn't have been in the building, but was in the building.
I also understand that on one of those sleepovers that there were some San Pedro street signs missing the next morning.
Or Bob or the big boy.
I don't know. We tried. We never got the big boy. That was more of a high school thing.
It was more of a high school thing, but some of
they
the
would try to
people,
steal Bob from the restaurant and dump him in the other school's pool.
Yeah. I guess there were some temple, but we were all in high school. Well, I know who did it, but
Shall remain.
It was temple people, friends, but it actually was school, not temple related.
Ettingers, you may or may not remember, you hosted a sleepover the night before our confirmation, and that was legendary, and I cannot tell any of those stories.
Wait, I don't even remember that. Wow.
You had the whole class for the night.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know if you were involved in any of Rachel's parties at our house when we were out of town.
Yeah, I don't know either.
That I found out.
It's not that you don't know, you just don't remember, Jake.
That's right.
Found out that our goody daughter wasn't such a goody daughter.
Well, the big thing was that I heard from some of my friends was if you were hanging around with the rabbi's son that was getting straight A's all the time, that there was no suspicion. You were going to get away with it.
Same on this end too.
So they hid behind. Is that how it works? So the truth comes out after all these years.
Yeah.
Yes, but nobody told my mother.
Yeah. Don't tell her about the parties that occurred at our house either.
What parties?
Yeah.
There were things I heard about summers and spring breaks.
Yeah.
I don't remember anymore.
I don't remember either.
I want to know from Sarah Gill, who's the only person here that's probably under 30, whether or not these kind of parties went on during your time as well.
I advise you not to answer that, Sarah.
Plead the fifth.
This is being recorded.
You know nothing.
Smart girl. So, Riva, I know that there were some things that you wanted to share also about the 1980s.
Well, we joined Temple Bethel actually the end of '79 due to Frankie Barman, who at that time was Lori's preschool teacher, and she told us about it. And what I remember most is Matthew going to Hebrew school for the first time, because Steve and I had no Jewish upbringing. We knew we were Jewish, but we never went to Hebrew school. We never went to Cheder, but we figured our children needed to know who they were and where they came from. And the first Thursday that Matthew came out of Hebrew school, he came out running to the car and he said, "Mom, I learned the Shema today." And I looked at him very unknowing and I said, "Great, what is that?" And he said, "Wow, it talks about God." And that said it all right there.
And you mentioned also that there was something with the Shema.
Yes, but I had the wrong child involved. That was actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
That one.
We'll save that for another decade.
For another year, yes.
Sounds good. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, I mean, we've talked a little bit about some of the things going on in the 80s for you as teenagers, from the perspective of the building changing and the library being remodeled and people coming in from different areas. I just want to kind of ask all of you if there's something in particular that was really meaningful, something that you loved from Temple Bethel back in the 80s. Anyone who hasn't had a chance to share that yet?
David Lee says it all. What can I say? When I decided, this is an interesting story. We moved here when
72.
Yeah. So when our oldest Ilana was ready to go to Hebrew Sunday school, I joined the temple.
She's emphasizing I because I didn't.
And
Remember that. I remember.
did the rabbi call the house, or did you?
No, we got a bill.
Oh, yes.
We got a bill from the temple to both of us, and I opened it up, And it was annoying to me at that time that it was addressed to both of us. So I called up the temple, and who answered the phone but Dave Lieb? And I was in the position of having to discuss with him why I was calling and why the bill was sent to both of us, and I'm not a member. And that we had a very nice conversation, and then we met one day for lunch, and we talked about whether or not God really exists. And at that point in time, I think I became a member.
But when we were deciding what temple to go to, when Ilana was ready, we went to Menorah, we went to Ner Tamid, and then we came to Bethel, and I think it was, I think it was a Passover Seder or something. And we saw David Lieb in action, and there was no question that's where we belonged. Yeah.
But that's 1970s. So
that doesn't matter.
It's a decade.
It's history. That's all
That's
right.
okay. It's close enough.
Yeah.
I think I can speak for Amy.
I will mention one thing, even though that wasn't really a decade that I was as involved in at the beginning, aside from the fact that we got married that decade, but the kids used to talk and talk and talk about Shabbat with the rabbi at the preschool. And he would talk about how much fun he had going in there with the little 2, 3, and 4-year-olds and doing Shabbat morning activities with them every Friday. And the kids looked forward to that every week. It was a really big deal.
I'll tell you one story, which I probably shouldn't share, but I'm going to. In the 80s, I became more involved with the temple for a short period of time. And I was elected to the board. And I went to 2 board meetings. And that's exactly what they were, board. And so after the 2 meetings, I resigned.
Whatever that is.
They were not boring. I was the president. They had just started the preschool. It was very controversial. Some people objected to the cost of it. And of course, that was besides the point. Anyway, it was the meetings, the board meetings would go till 1 o'clock in the morning.
They were long. I remember that.
Yeah.
I never stayed that long for the 2 meetings I went to.
Maybe you missed the exciting ones.
Rabbi, I want to tell a little story, and it's almost the middle 80s, but
Can't hear you, Don.
my daughter and her mother.
Oh, Don, can you come a little closer? People
Sure.
are having trouble hearing. Thank you so much.
Does that help? So, in 1983, my daughter had her bat mitzvah in Houston at what I believe is the 2nd largest Reform synagogue in America. And she had it like literally the week after school got out, and then flew back with me after her bat mitzvah. And she and David had a really special bond. They just always, from the time she was a little kid, always adored David. She and Amy were best friends, stood up for each other at their weddings and all of that. But she came back, and the first Friday night, she went over, of course, hugged the rabbi, and they talked, and he said, "You just had your bat mitzvah. Would you like to do something here?" And she said, "Oh, I would love to." And so they sat down over the next week or so, planned out what they were going to do. And a few Friday nights later, she came onto the bima and proceeded to do most of the service again. And when she got home that night, she said to Roz and I have to tell you, that service meant more to me than my whole big bat mitzvah that I had back in Houston. It meant so much more to me. This is where my family is. And that kind of fills in that part of what makes Temple Bethel and David Lieb and just everything about where we are, even today, that just, you can't express it. It's that moving.
Yeah.
It was personalized. And I know, for those of you that don't know, I live about an hour away. I live in Irvine, and I've been back teaching for a number of years. But when I would go in the 80s and the 90s for high holy days, I would walk in the door and I was home. Even though I am also affiliated with a South Orange County synagogue for like almost 40 years, San Pedro is my home.
It's very special.
Yeah.
So I live across the country and Bethel is still my home. I haven't found, I obviously belong to a synagogue here where my former father-in-law was the rabbi. It wasn't and still is not home to me. Thank goodness for COVID in the sense that I can join Bethel services via Zoom or Facebook because I have been for the last 2.5 or 3 years. It's much more home to me than where I am affiliated here. So, and that it's because of you. It's because of Dad. So, and I know that Jacob agrees. Dad loved people. He loved people from newborns to toddlers to teenagers to senior citizens. He just got along with everybody at every stage of their lives, and it was very important to him to be a part of everybody's life, and he didn't take it for granted, and he just loved all of you, and it's just been very special for us to be a part of everybody's families as well.
Amy, I have to totally agree with you because I believe your dad named Sarah the 3rd generation of the Skoll family. I believe she was the last baby naming that he did. And she's now 3rd generation Skoll that belongs to Bethel.
Yeah.
You just triggered a thought. One of the things that David always did was a family Shabbat. And back in the 70s and particularly early 80s, we had a huge number of young families with young kids. And so every family Shabbat, he would take himself down to the second to the bottom step, because our bima had, I don't know, 6.
Read a story from.
Yeah, it was a very, and so he would sit on the bottom and he would invite, and there were so many kids that they would be back right down the middle aisle. They'd be back halfway to the back. And he would sit there, and there were little kids that would wander around and come and sit in his lap and everything else. But he would tell that story to those kids, and they were mesmerized sitting there with the rabbi. It was
there were stories about hell.
Yeah,
most of the time they were, yeah.
So since we're talking about like the years when I was a teenager, and also because we did the Temple like oral history interview last week, I was thinking about this, like who my dad particularly loved. He loved everybody, but who he really loved were teenagers that were having trouble at home, who were a little sad, who needed help. And he knew, and he found them, and he helped them. And there's probably, and I've heard about this from friends of mine who think that he saved their life. And there's more stories out there than you know. But to turn it to a lighter note, what I also remember is just like how impossible it was to get he and my mom to stop chit-chatting with people at the Oneg and go home. He would always tell us we're going home, like, go get ready to get in the car. And eventually we started saying that's the 20-minute warning. Because we knew there was going to be 20 minutes more of chit-chatting at least before we got in the car. Until, this being the 80s talk, that was always the case, except during the original run of Miami Vice, because he really wanted to be home at 10 o'clock on Miami Vice. More than he wanted to chit-chat with all of you.
Well, the chit-chat is known as the Jewish goodbye. Right. Because it always takes half an hour to go from where you are to out the door.
Yeah.
And it's still
everybody,
cars. I mean,
you all would stop him on the way out the door.
Eileen doesn't say goodbye and leave. She says goodbye and chit-chat and leaves. That drives me.
It was modeled well.
But that's because of all the love, right? All the care, that just being a part of people's lives. That's beautiful. So I just want to ask a couple more questions because there's such great tidbits. And actually, Jacob, was there something you wanted to say earlier?
Oh, I was just going to say for Amy and me, yes, that Rabbi Lee was also the reason that we belong to the temple. But it was actually the Rebbitzin that made us show up every week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Jeff, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Hebrew Union College had an evaluation of each of the temples about every 10 years, and they came to the Temple Bethel, and they had absolutely glowing reaction to what they saw. They couldn't believe that this little temple with a rather small congregation on literally the edge of the North American continent was one of the best temples, the most activities, the most events that they had seen anywhere. And full of praise.
That's wonderful. So, I mean, a lot has changed, right, in the past 40 years. Sorry, Barbara.
I was saying for the activities that have just continued on, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Under your rabbinate.
As much as I'm
This chair is not good for you.
So, I mean, just piggybacking on Barbara, what you're talking about, right, is over the past 40 years, how have things changed and how have they stayed the same?
I think the feelings are still there, that this is a place we all call home. And we just, no matter where we go, we feel the most comfortable there. And I've heard, our kids say that and other kids say that. And we were at a funeral, I think, where we were at Norman Cantor's funeral, and they were going to have the eulogies at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And one of the kids got up, I think maybe it was Beth or Amy, I can't remember, but they said, "We are so happy we're having it here at Temple Bethel. This is our home. This is where we should be. We grew up with this temple, and this is where."
Yes, that's right.
Giving the eulogies for our father. I thought that was beautiful. So that has passed on down to the generations, and
yeah.
And I know that our children, no matter where they are, have gotten a very strong sense of their Judaism from the Temple Bethel and the religious school. And they may not always be so religious, and they aren't, formally religious, but they know who they are. And I'm so proud of my kids because they know who they are. And I know my daughter is passing that heritage on to her children. And it comes from the top. It comes from Temple.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Barbara. Does anyone else want to talk about what's changed and what has remained the same over the past 40 years?
No more silver coffee and tea urns and the glass plates, etc., and the regular type silverware.
I mean, a lot has changed in 40 years. I mean, the configuration of the temple has changed at least twice. You're the third rabbi that we've had in that period of time. We had probably 3 or 4 cantors with Elon now a permanent fixture. It's hard to, I mean, a lot of the people are the same, but a lot of the people are no longer there. I mean, that's unfortunately in our age group, what's been happening.
Well, my impression is because of Zoom, we're involved again. That's the bottom line, because Barbara Ringgold, you know, if you'll recall, we are involved in Temple Bethel, South Orange County also, because we live in Laguna Woods. But this Zoom has given us the opportunity to reconnect with many people like the Leaches and the Skulls and the Rikers, of course, that we wouldn't have the opportunity to do because it's an hour away. And we're involved in other synagogues there. But this is definitely with the people and with your encouragement, Cassie, we're back on the saddle again. Really. In the saddle?
And that's truly a blessing for all of us that can be the case. The fact that all of us can be here, Amy all the way on the other coast, right? And like you in Orange County and wherever we are, here we are together reminiscing. Yeah, Leanne was here. Exactly. It's so lovely that we can all be, and then you can be here with your mom too. I mean, this truly is a blessing, but that sense of family, that sense of community, what I'm hearing from all of you, that's been part of the DNA of Temple Bethel for a very, very long time.
And I see Barbara Brickman's name, and I mean, when I was a little girl, it was Mrs. Brickman. And then when I got older and I came back, I had trouble saying just Barbara to her because it's always Mrs. Brick, but it's the same friendly personality. And I was so glad she's still active at the temple.
It is, yeah. So right now, and Barbara, I'm so glad that you're here. Totally okay that you don't show your face. We know your beautiful face, and we can all, we're just so grateful that you are able to be here tonight with us. As we look at the time, it's already 7:54, for some of us significantly later than that. And I just want to end with one final question. For anyone who hasn't already had a chance to kind of offer this in a past That's So TBE talk that we've had, are there any wishes or hopes that you have for the future? We're celebrating our centennial and also looking forward to what we hope will be a really wonderful next 100 years. Are there any wishes that you'd like to offer?
Well, yeah, I mean, change the youth group back to Tosby, put the youth lounge back next to the social hall. But seriously,
Agreed.
I mean, what I'm excited about is like the school growing. And what was nice when we were kids is always a pretty big group of us. And I can see, especially in the younger grades at our school, that we're starting to get bigger numbers and like tighter friendships among the kids. And I'm excited for when they get to be mischievous teenagers, for what that's going to be like.
as a parent of kids getting close to their teenage years, or at least one of them, I'm a little nervous for that personally, but
Well,
but you're a parent of teenagers now, so that's wonderful.
They're safer here than they would be a lot of other places. It's
That's true.
okay.
That's true.
as far as you know.
I never worried about my kids when they were teenagers, as long as they were with Temple Bethel groups and.
As long as,
As
they were hanging out with Jacob and I.
Stories, I don't know.
Nah, my parents always knew what I was doing before I got home. San Pedro's still a small town.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as we close out tonight, I mean, I had asked for blessings for the next 100 years, but I think that the answer to that is probably that everyone here in this room and everyone who's not here in this room, but who's a part of TBE, you're the blessings of TBE going forward. This entire Havdalah program, which was inspired, of course, by Angela Romero, who did some really beautiful work going into the history of our temple, has given me, and I think all of us, an opportunity to really celebrate so much that has been just that has made TBE the incredible community that it is. So I just want to say thank you to every single one of you for being here, for sharing your stories, and for continuing to help TBE to really thrive and shine. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this.
Rabbi.
Thank you for.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for including me.
I'm so glad you were able to. And next month we'll come back and we'll be talking about the 1990s. So look out for that.
Good night, Amy.
Good
night, all.
Night.
Sleep well.
Thank you.
Night, Amy.
Good to see
Good
you.
night.
I want to call Barbara here.
Good night.
Good night, TDE family.
Good night, everyone. Have a wonderful one.